All right. Good evening, everybody. Great to see so many of you on. Thanks for joining us this evening. As always, I'm joined by the principals who are here as well to dive in as we talk through and get a chance to somewhat connect with you all and update you mostly on where we are at and what's going on. As always, we'll take about 10 minutes together, probably 15. You know, I like to ramble sometimes to update you on few key things happening as we kick off 2021 right now. And then, of course, spend a lot of time to answer questions that are on your mind as best as we can. For those of you who are on early, you heard my attempted run through. We have some data that is incoming and things that we've been adjusting down to up to a few hours ago. To make sure we have the most updated information to give to you all tonight. So our aim is to update you a bit on some timelines and talk through sort of what our next steps are in a few key areas as we move into the rest of this year. And as always, we really want to guide ourselves through our guiding principles. Specifically tonight, a few key areas that you'll hear me reference or talk through and around. One is really thinking about, again, that responsiveness and flexibility. We know we reference this pretty heavily in our December town hall, and it continues to be such an incredible need for us right now as we really think about what the remainder of this year looks like. The news and what's happening as far as the environment around us with COVID is changing constantly, and our need to adapt to that is really imperative. As well as, and you'll hear me reference this too, this principle around the idea of making sure that we're preparing our teachers for rigorous instruction. And I'm going to name that right now because we are finding ourselves as we're thinking about bringing back more students in this space where we really have to analyze and recognize what that looks like. You've heard us say from the beginning that we do not want to compromise our program. We want to make sure our teachers are prepared. And as we iterate this next step, this next stage, how do we ensure that both those truths still hold? So those are sort of the key areas or themes that we'll be referencing or speaking through and around as we dive into our conversation today. Where I want to start first is probably an area that many of you all are familiar with if you have been watching the news as far as what's going on with the coronavirus. But right now, it's not good. It's actually the worst it's been. Which is sobering to just pause on for a minute. I had a conversation with a parent today at lunch duty, and we both just kind of paused and said, wow, how is this the place that we are at where things are now worse than they were a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago? We're not out of the woods. And I think I can speak for myself personally that I was prepared with this mindset. There we go, 2020, see you later. It's been real, 2021, let's go, let's do this. And we're a little like 2020 right now. We're still feeling like we're stuck in 2020. This new year has not got us past. It's actually, we're very deep in these throes. And so I just want to identify that as we're really thinking through where we are at in this planning process, this continues to be critically important. We have to monitor what's happening around us. We know there's some light at the end of the tunnel. We have to hold on to get to that light. Now is not the time for us to let up. And I personally have to keep reminding myself of that because this has been a drudge. This has been 9 months of a drudge. It's continuing. It's going to continue to be a drudge. And we have to maintain vigilance. We have to make sure that we continue to be responsive and prepared and on point in recognizing that what is happening around us is not okay. And is very heavy and is important for us to keep on top of. Our team at BCS, our staff, you families who are back in person, you have done a phenomenal job of continuing to help ensure that we have done everything we can to mitigate that risk as we talk about. We want to continue that momentum together, and you'll hear me talk more about this later. We really need to make sure that we are locking arms metaphorically right now and prepared to face these next few months because they are going to be hard. And I think it's important to just identify that right now. Knowing that, I do want to talk us through the scenarios of what's upcoming when we think about what's next. And so you heard us say this in December. You saw some notes probably in Bare Essentials. We want to give you some firm dates and discuss this a little bit. Right now, if you are a remote family, we will be sending out a survey to our K-5 families tomorrow that will open tomorrow. Our middle school families who are remote, you'll be getting a survey starting the following Wednesday, January 20th. And this will be about your interest in returning in person. It is not required. We will continue running our remote program. But again, we want to make sure that we understand what families are thinking about. A few key things I want to identify with this. Number one, you'll see on there, our anticipated return date right now, and you'll see a little bit more when I show you a calendar. Mid-February, early March, there's all the asterisks just because of the last slide that we saw. Again, we still don't know what's playing out around us. A lot of asterisks on this, but that would be the earliest that anyone who is remote and would like to come back in person would have the opportunity. There are some more caveats, though, that I want to just identify and just be very real with you all right now. Right now, we anticipate that this will be the last survey we push out for the idea of remote coming back in person. We anticipate it will be the last survey for the remainder of the year. Here's the sort of thought process behind that. Knowing the vamp up, knowing the lift, you've heard me talk about this, of looking at the survey, analyzing the survey, determining what's happening with our schedule, how our schedule needs to adjust, what staffing moves we need to make, how we change other students into new rosters, then how we build those rosters, how we vamp up to bring people back. It's a huge, long process. You know this, right? So while we're surveying now, the reason we're not bringing back until February is there's so many steps of that. Our recognition that if we were to run another round of surveying later, March or April, the vamp up would take significant time as well. And the concern would be the number of weeks that students would be even able to come back, as well as just very honestly, our staffing capacity and space capacity. At some stage, we're hitting that and we're pretty close. So we need to be aware of that. We have said consistently, and we want to continue to account for this. We want our remote experience and our in-person experience to still be true to our program. And to do that, at some stage, we need to draw that line and say, this is what we can do to stay true to our program. So knowing that right now, we are just saying we anticipate this will be the last survey that we provide for those who are remote to come back in person. We anticipate. I also just want to name, we are going to do everything. And I'm looking at these three principles now, and I know how hard they work. We're going to do everything we can for those who take the survey to figure out a way to get them back in person. That is not a guarantee. I can't sit here and make a false guarantee for you because I don't want you to feel that resentment or disappointment or anger on the other side of it. We're going to do everything we can, but very transparently, I don't know what the numbers are going to look like. I don't know if 20 families in first grade are going to say, yes, I'd love to come back. I don't know if 70, I don't know if 5. And all of those scenarios, that spectrum of scenarios creates very different scheduling situations, creates very different staffing models that we have to look at. That's a big part of the reason why we wanted to get your input now, early in January, so we can spend these next few weeks really tinkering and figuring out what that schedule looks like. So we're going to do everything we can to get creative with that schedule, to stay true to our program, and to get every student back that wants to, but I don't want to make a false guarantee for you. We'll obviously keeping you updated on that process, but really getting an understanding of the numbers will help us behind the scenes figure out what's the best way to make sure that that's possible for all students. And I just want to reiterate that last point there too. The constraints that we face our staff, and the constraints we face our space, right? And so we've got to work within those constraints. We've got to work within the class structurings that we have. So that's sort of where we are at right now in thinking about the surveying. I'll show you here in a moment a calendar that looks a little bit more at that, but know in your minds, if you're interested in thinking about back in person, those surveys that come out right now, we anticipate that will be the last survey for the year. You'll hear me talk a little bit later of if you are still remote and you say, gosh, I don't want to send my student back in person full time, but I do want them connecting. We think the same thing. So do know that while we anticipate this will be the last, hey, come on back in person full days or hybrid model survey, we do anticipate as we get into the spring, as we're crossing all of our fingers and toes, that as we get some ability to get creative with different ways to socially distance, we'll get a chance maybe be outside more. We definitely have already begun some conversations, high level of thinking about what are ways we could bring back other students who are remote, whether it's for small class gatherings on outdoors or doing some events that are socially distant. So know that that's a possibility and definitely something that we're looking at as we get into mid and late spring, recognizing that there might be some families who say, I can't, for plenty of reasons, I'm unable to come every day or unable to commit to the in-person, but I do want some interaction. Know that that's something we're looking at down the road, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. We'll take questions in a bit. So if you have questions, hang on to them. Know that we'll come your way for them. Let me talk to you about this calendar here. So I want to preview a few things that you see on here. One, you see that window for the surveys. You see when the surveys open and you see when the surveys close. We're going to stick to those pretty tight because, again, we are sort of all stuck in making any decisions, any plans, in any scheduling until we see those numbers. We actually had a meeting with our leadership team earlier this week, Monday, which is all of our team leads, many of them that you know. And we are talking through an iteration of something else, and it ended up coming back to this question of, well, who's actually coming back in person? And so those numbers really matter for us to make sure that we're mapping out meaningfully these next stages through the next few months. So that opening and those closing dates are important. Look for that survey tomorrow, K-5 remote families, and then the following week for our 6-8 families. The other thing I want to note on here that you see down there is the NWEA on-site testing. Thanks to all of you who filled out that survey right now. We've been crunching the numbers on this up to today. Ms. Stone has just done a phenomenal job of really getting creative. And we have over 180 right now who've made the decision to come back for on-site testing. As you can imagine, when you took that survey, there's a lot of different options. Some said, oh, I can come back on Monday morning, Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, all these different iterations. So we're working through all those now to make the scheduling, as well as to make sure we can accommodate needs and locations. Know that if you did say, hey, I'd love my student to come back for that test, that you'll be getting information from us early next week, both about site location, because we may have to have you take it at a different site just based on the numbers of students. So if you were a South student, we may say, hey, we need you at North, or vice versa, just for the sake of the test and numbers. Right now, we're looking at testing sessions of 20 students at a time. And so based on the sizing of the room that we have, the space that we have available, and the number of computers that we have accessible at a given time, we feel confident that a proctor will be able to manage 20 students socially distanced with masks to be able to take those tests. So if you said, hey, I'll definitely have my kid come back, great, look for that email with all the details next week, what day, specifically what time, what your student needs with them, etc. If you haven't taken that survey, because we're at 180, it's pretty tight. I'll just be honest. Our ability to maneuver is tricky. So I don't want that to stop you from taking it. If you were like, gosh, I was going to take that today, I just forgot. But just know that as we're getting into those, especially today, tomorrow, people are taking it. It's going to get a little challenging for us to absolutely guarantee we can get you in a spot, especially accommodating a specific time request. So no, that's where we're at. That's happening for us that last week in January. This next slide I want to share with you is the schedule after that. So a few things to note here. Middle school, we have our intercession number 2 starting up, which is exciting. It feels like we just ended intercession 1, excited for intercession 2 to begin. And I know our team is already hard at work figuring out best ways to utilize the space and time and continue to get creative with the modalities that we're engaging in. So look for more info on that coming from Mr. Gross and the middle school team in the coming weeks. You'll see that bridges midwinter break, which I'll talk about in a minute. I do want to note before I talk about midwinter break, I want to talk about that tentative date that you see down there in the corner. It says tentative return for in-person students K-3. There's an asterisk there. There's the word tentative because it is tentative. That would be the earliest date that we would bring back new in-person K-3 students on site. And as you just heard me say, there's a lot of factors to that. If we get numbers back and it's really a lot for us to figure out, and we've got to do a lot of roster shifting and getting creative, it might be a little longer. If the numbers play out in different ways, if the public health scene plays out differently, that might shift. Obviously, we'll keep you all updated. The earliest would be that Monday, and then our 4-5, our 6-8 would be in the weeks following that. It may not be the week after. We may not be able to do great all new K-3 that week of February 22nd, and then boom, the next week new 4-5 go. That 4-5 gets a little trickier, as some of you know who are our hybrid ones. The space becomes an issue with class sizes. We think about teachers who are shared across campuses. So we may need a week or 2 weeks between the entry of students to bring back a new group. Again, we just don't quite know. But no, the earliest we'd start bringing back students is February 22nd. That would definitely be our K-3 students first that we'd have come back. You might say, Maureen, we've talked about different models. What about, like, could some K-3 students come back 4 days instead of 5 days now? Would that bring more students back? Could our 4-5 come 5 days instead of 2 days? What would that help? Those are all great suggestions and all things we have talked through. Again, we don't know. It depends a lot on the numbers. If we have a small number of students who are remote wanting to return in person, it allows us to maneuver differently than if we have a larger group. But also, if we have a larger group, we can maneuver differently in positive ways too. So having more doesn't necessarily mean bad. It could create us some good adjustments in places. So there's really no right answer here. That's why it's so important for us just to hear what's best for you and best for your family. I want to reiterate that keeping to our program is key. We don't want to compromise our program at all. And I think that honestly is a conversation that we named early on. We said, look, is there a stage where we bring back enough in-person people that our remote students maybe get a different structure in the program, maybe they have larger classes? And very quickly we said we don't believe in that. And we wanted to stay true to that. It's what makes things tricky. It'd be a lot easier just to be like, great, bring them all back and just lump everybody together in one remote classroom and let's cut out, a special for them this day and this time, and that will make things easier. That'd be an easier route, and we're going to try to maintain that program. We know we need to maintain that program, and that's what's making this a lot more complicated. So no, that would be the earliest date that new students K through 3 would return. But I do want to talk about that midwinter break right in there. Specifically. So I want to recap how we've handled breaks so far. Let's think back to Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving was the first long break we had. And if you were in person, or even if you were remote, you probably saw us right in Bare Essentials, that after Thanksgiving, we had 2 days where everybody was remote. We did that so that if individuals had been in mixed households and or had traveled, there was time for them to test upon return. I'll have you know, at that stage, there was not a travel ban into our county. Over this most recent winter break in December, we had this extra week, right, where all this came back from being remote. And I'm going to be really transparent here, these next 2 slides. Truthfully, we didn't lean heavy enough on the orders from our public health department, which we're going to look at here in a minute. We're going to review those. But I'll name that's a bit of a miss. Being honest, we wanted to really be mindful of the recognition of what families have going on in their lives and what's playing out. There was a travel ban over the December break. And there's families who have adhered to all the public health guidelines, who have been at home, sheltered in place. I am with you. This is hard. This is hard. It is hard around the holidays. It is hard after the holidays. I'm having the hardest time right now, everybody. Just speaking personally of my gosh, I haven't been on a plane in over a year, right? I haven't seen family. I haven't gotten in a car and traveled besides driving here from Texas. I'm exhausted. I have fatigue in the house. I know many of you do. I don't have children. You have children at home. I understand there are so many constraints. This is hard. And yet we know the numbers are not playing in our favor right now. People are dying. And there is a health ban, a travel ban in place right now. And there are so many families who have been making the choices to ensure that they are adhering to the public health guidelines and what's existing. And we need to make sure that we're honoring their needs and being faithful to them. What you see here on the screen is that travel ban. And there's a recognition that we have maybe people aren't aware of the language. So I want to make sure that we have this available for you as well. The travel ban uses the word discourages travel. But it does say pretty specifically that non-essential travel, leisure travel, is prohibited. It's strongly discouraged. We need to make that commitment to hold ourselves to that. It's what our community needs now. It's what our staff and our students need. And honestly, and I'll be really honest here, it's easy. And I found myself in the trap this week, and I had to be like, whoa, Maureen, get out of that trap. It's easy to be like, oh, but I'm just going to go on a small trip. I'm going to be safe. I'll be in my car. I'm going to go someplace. I won't see people. I'll isolate there, and then I'll come back. The ban is very clear in that it's 150 miles outside the county. You need to quarantine, and it does specifically name it's for leisure. It's strongly discouraged to wait. When we turn a blind eye to that or say, oh, it's okay, I'll be safe, it doesn't apply to me. And again, I'm putting myself in this bucket, y'all, because I had these thoughts. When we think that way, when I think that way, it's not the best for our students or for our staff. It's not adhering to the commitments that we've made to create the safe community and a safe environment. Some of you may be aware, because I recognize parents have connections and talk, but we have had families who've returned from Thanksgiving break, from our winter holiday break, and haven't been open and disclosed with us upfront that travel ban. And we found out about it whether through students or through other families, and that just puts us in a very awkward situation. It's not safe. It's not safe for our students. It's not safe for our staff. So we are sharing this directive with you. It's what the word is when we look at the public health officials who are experts and professionals, not me, who just wants to get out and travel someplace, but the public health officials and experts are saying, don't. And so we're going to make that request and say, don't. Not the small trip, not the travel someplace, just going to be me and my family. We're going to stay safe. Please don't. Um, we need to be models. We need to be models in our community. It's the same. We're going to make the same request to our staff. And I recognize that this is like the biggest bummer, and it is for me too, because midwinter break is a time where all have plans and want to do things and go skiing and visit family, or go to visit the lake or go hiking. There's so many things that we typically could do during this time, and we need to not. We are so close to this, and we cannot afford ourselves a setback, not just for our school, but any deeper in our community. This is bad. Those of you who are in the healthcare industry know this. You are on the front lines. You are experiencing this. So for that reason, we are committed to coming back Monday, the 22nd. If you are in person, we'll have you be back in person on that day. We ask for your help if you're thinking about considering going from remote to in-person, recognizing that. We don't anticipate our travel ban will be lifted. We assume that this will be the same ban that's in place as of that timeline. And thusly, we will say, great, we are adhering to that. We are expecting that our community is following the direction of our county, of our public health officials, and that we will resume in-person learning on the 22nd. We can't be the exception. We can't allow ourselves to be that. It's not who we are. So I want to be very clear about that and give you that language as we think about moving into these next few stages of whether it's taking a survey or just thinking about what's upcoming in these next few weeks. I know we are all sacrificing so much. It is not lost on me. It's going to make me emotional when I talk about it, but it is hard. It is so hard right now. I am confident that we are going to get through this, and we're going to get to this other side, and we will all be stronger for it. And gosh, it's going to be hard. And so more than anything, we just need this community to really wrap arms, around each other as we can virtually these next few months to help support each other and get through this, because I do know that we're going to see a lot of positive outcomes here as we get into the spring and summer and hopefully fall. And the sooner we all are able to help commit and be part of the solution, then the quicker we will get there. So with that, Jen, just some final things to be thinking about as we move forward. You saw some of these, some of these, but just to keep you all updated on what we are also thinking about, aside from all these scheduling components, thinking about what's upcoming. Co-curriculars, you saw that go out in Bare Essentials last Thursday. Reminder, those signups are happening for our K through 5s. Those will continue from until this Thursday. So make sure that you have popped on and done those signups for co-curriculars. VAPA signups are also happening. You also saw that link in Bare Essentials, so make sure you've looked through those options, which are great. The NWEA testing, that was also pushed, lots of opportunities there. And then you heard us talk about, at the opening here, our aim is to hopefully have some socially distanced events. Again, as we get into the spring, that's our hope, is to get creative. And how can we do that with members of our community, some of our classes, students, staff members, just really getting creative in ways we can celebrate more together and start getting some of that physical FaceTime back together. So those are all coming down the road, something that we're excited about and want to keep you all updated on. We really wanted, though, to give you the space to recognize where we are at and thinking about these next few weeks as we do take on those surveys from you, figure out what's next for our in-person students, and then really think about the calendaring of what needs to happen here. I went way over my 15 minutes, y'all. Never let me tell you minutes. It's the worst. I'm awful at it. These principals know I talk all day. Now's the time for questions. Questions that you have for us that we can help answer as you, whether it's helping you make a decision, if you're remote and thinking about in person, or whether it's just questions about what's upcoming for us down the pipeline. I see we've got a good handful here already. A question, I'm going to kick these principals to you because I've been talking too long. It's a good question, and one it's a tough one to answer. Will teachers change? If students are staying remote, what will happen to the teachers of students who are remote?
I can answer that question.
Yep.
There will definitely be changes. Whether it's a change for your child or not remains to be seen. But there will definitely be changes with the need to bring more people back.
A good question here on return dates. We know mid-February and early March are big differences in timelines. Hopefully seeing that timeline a bit helped you see that the earliest would be February 22nd. And then you can kind of play out 1 to 2 weeks after that for 4, 5, 6, 8. Again, as we learn numbers, we'll know more. It's very hard for us to lock in, for me today to say, this is the day it's going to be, exactly for the reasons identified, and that we just don't know what's happening with public health and with our scheduling. So once we have a better idea of numbers, Once our surveys close, we'll be able to give you some updates and clarify that timeline a bit. And then at that stage, if you're like, I'm a little nervous still about this timeline, I'm not sure, these principals are great. And I know would be happy to talk with you a bit more about processing that together. So don't let the ambiguity of a date be your the reason you say forget it. Open that conversation with your principal. I know that they'll happily talk through that with you. Good question. Current number of on-site students at each campus. Ooh, do we have the ability to? Jess looks like she knows. Jess.
For North Campus, elementary and middle total, keeping in mind they're not all there every day, because middle school is there Tuesday, Wednesday, 4-5 is there Thursday, Friday, and then K through 3 is there the whole time. But in total, over the course of the week, it's 235, right at there.
For
Lisa,
South,
yep.
133. With 4 and 5 not there every day.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Roughly a third of our students are in person, and the 2/3 are remote currently. Good question about NWEA testing. You'll have more info on that, but no need to have a negative test result before coming to campus, just based on the way that we are structured with the masking, social distancing, etc. So that won't be a request that we make at that stage. Lisa, do you want to talk a bit about if someone's hybrid, if they're 4th and 5th graders, what NWEA testing might look like for them?
Sure. So for those remote learners who will be coming on site to take a test, they will be taking the math test. So we are having our 4th and 5th hybrid teachers administer the math portion of the NWEA to their learners when they're on site. Because their learners are only on site 2 days a week, we're giving those teachers the choice. Do they want to give the 2 other tests during their in-person time or not? And so definitely the math, maybe 1 or 2 of the others.
While I have you, you want to talk about state testing and what we know and what we don't know?
Yep. Well, the state says that the CASP will be given at this point. That they also acknowledge that may change. We have a new administration coming in. They did mention in my last call with them that may be a factor. Who knows? They're still trying to figure out how it will be administered online in terms of the interface between the teacher and their learners. But as of right now, CASP testing is taking place.
Fabulous. I see a lot of questions about what's the story with teachers and vaccinations. We are following the news daily, as I'm sure many of you are and aware. And again, I know we've got some great healthcare officials and professionals who are part of our community. Right now, teachers are slated to be in phase 1B, and currently we are at phase 1A. When it becomes available in phase 1B, then we'll learn more about what that looks like and what potentials are there. But it definitely is something that we're watching for, like many others of you, I'm sure, are understanding what are opportunities for members of your family, yourself, based on your jobs, age, etc. So we are keeping a close eye on how that is playing out, and in touch with individuals at the county as well as local hospitals as we work through what possibilities there could be there. Good questions here on this is a really interesting question just around what is it the strategies teachers might be using to make sure those who are remote are actually also making sure that they get that same program, that same structure as those who are in person. What are some learnings that we've had as we've worked through this mix of students who are remote now coming back to in person, that balance? If you all, I want to talk a bit about some things that we've learned and how we ensure that program is the same.
And start, and then Dan and Lisa, you're welcome to chime in with anything. One of the things that we've always really valued at Bullis is the opportunity for our learners to collaborate with one another. And I know our teachers have been working really hard to experiment with what ways can we get kids to collaborate safely if they're in person, but then also online when, that's kind of a whole new learning curve for everyone. And so employing strategies such as opportunities in breakout rooms and collaborative online platforms, really trying to create space for our learners who are remote to have smaller connections with their peers in their class. So that's been a big emphasis throughout the fall to ensure that in the absence of the kind of normal interactions we'd have in person, running into friends on the playground or sitting at a table group in class, how do we ensure that online kids can still get some of those same experiences? So that has been a big effort. That is still an ongoing effort. Once you've been doing certain strategies for a while in the fall, you got to switch it up and make them novel once again in the springtime. And then continuing to offer our programs such as co-curriculars, houses, specialist classes. That was something that we felt is core to our program, and we need to ensure is happening whether our students are in person or remote.
I can add a little bit of a middle school lens to this too. I was in a 6th grade classroom during math this morning, and Miss Sanfilippo not only had like her in-person kids, in person, but she had her remote learners that are in the same class dialed in as well. So what I saw happening was Miss Sanfilippo talking to one of her remote learners in conjunction with the in-person learners engaged as well. So there was collaboration happening with our in-person learners and our remote learners right there on campus and at home at the same time, which is one of the things that our middle school teachers are starting to really figure out and embrace in living in this hybrid world. And another thing we've done, I know middle school families, I know you've heard me talk a lot about advisory this year, but it's something where we've been able to, on those Tuesdays and Wednesdays where we have our middle school learners on campus, they're still in those same advisory cohorts that they were in since August. They're still maintaining that continuity. They're still maintaining those connections, even if they're not, on site and remote. So we're really paying particular mind to how we can keep that cohesion wherever possible.
Lisa's good. I think they summed it up, Lisa. Yep, got a thumbs up from Lisa. Awesome. I see a parent has shared, which is good to know. Travel advisory is tightened or is in the process of being tightened to 120 miles instead of the 150 from the Santa Clara County border. So right now it's 150 from what we have pulled states 150 from the border. It sounds like the new travel advisory is going to be 120 miles from your residence. I want to point out that because that brings up a really important point that I just want to, again, be real about. There is this world, right, where we think, oh, that's fine. I'll just travel and quarantine when my student comes back for 10 days. Coming off of midwinter break, I just want to be real what that means for us on the school side. If families make that decision, the lift that puts on a teacher is incredibly challenging. It is not just throwing a kid in a remote class and letting them be in a remote class for 10 days so they can come back in person. If your student is in person and they are not able to be on site for those 10 days, that teacher's having to now get creative in how am I changing my whole lesson structure for them. In the midst of already having to change all of our lesson structures and the way we're delivering and what's happening, that's just a huge ask for teachers. And if a family's like, oh, that's cool, it's just us, when that replicates and now it becomes multiple families, now we're having to do that in multiple iterations for multiple folk, it's really tough. And so I just ask again, as you recognize what's playing out around us, is health scene is not okay. Do not travel. Do not say it's okay for us to go 150 miles, be fine, we'll just quarantine for 10 days. It not only is putting our community at risk, but it also is making this huge lift on teachers who are having to adjust their planning. So we just really, really ask you to consider that as we get closer to this February timeline. I see a few questions about COVID cases on site. You all should have received an email from me during the holiday break. We did have one positive case on site. We have been open for, somebody correct me, 10 weeks. Sometimes weeks just flow together, everybody. Roughly 10 weeks since mid-September, October-ish. Yeah. Roughly 10 weeks, we've had one positive case. That's a huge testament to the work that families and staff have done to really make sure that we are being as cautious as possible. It really is. Come home, go to school. Come home, go to school. That's a lot of the life that many of us are leading, and that's it, right? That's all that we are doing. and that has helped create the safe environment. Families here doing the same thing, homeschool, and that is helping protect in many ways. So while we don't want to say that we've had any cases, we've been, and we've said we will be. We've had one. And that's the only one that we've had on site at this stage. A good question, Lisa, about why NWEA? With everything going on, why testing kids right now? I keep going to Lisa family, so you all know Lisa oversees all the NWEA testing, so is manipulating behind the scenes all the scheduling and whatnot.
Yeah, there are several reasons, actually, especially for this winter season. One thing is we took the NWEA last winter, shortly before everything closed down. It's going to help us understand growth that's taken place during this time that remote learning has been in place from last winter to this winter. So it's going to give us as a school a lot of really interesting information to be able to gauge our program. Most importantly, though, it allows us to gauge individual learner growth. It allows us to see where your child has grown from last winter to this winter, from the fall to the winter, in order to be able to adjust. And so a teacher knows where they may need to adjust their program. So their teacher knows who might be ready for more challenge, so the teacher knows what types of things each child is ready to learn next. It provides such specific data that is so useful in that regard. What's different with NWEA testing from other types of testing, like the CASP testing, it doesn't just test grade level standards. It goes in both directions to really pinpoint exactly where your child is in terms of concept and skill knowledge, and actually provides really clear learning targets that teachers are able to then use to meet the needs of your child. That is the most important reason and why it's so useful.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. Good question. What percentage of staff are back or are coming back, and what does support look like for them? I couldn't run the numbers offhand percentage wise. I mean, it's enough for our to make sure all of our students have their homeroom teachers, but also it's not just a homeroom teacher, right? If there's a class, let's use an example of our fourth graders back, we know they're split into two sections, right? So we have multiple individuals back to help support in that way. Our ATs have been phenomenal and really stepping up and helping support, because there's, and parents, many of you realize this, we have a lot more lunch periods now. Recess periods look different, right? Things can overlap in the way when they could before. It's a huge lift. And just having enough bodies to be able to do that. And our ATs have been phenomenal and really helping step up and support our homeroom teachers and our campuses in providing that. Thinking about what support looks like for teachers, I'd love to hear maybe from a principal of what does support look like and how we're supporting staff.
I can start with a few, and then Dan and Lisa go ahead and add some in. Some of the things that we've been doing that we always aim to do with our staff is to protect collaboration time for them to have as a teaching team. Despite all of the scheduling constraints, we've worked really hard to ensure that there is protected time for teams to collaborate within the workday so that they can utilize one another for support in relation to planning, in relation to just being a teacher in the time of COVID, and supporting individual student needs. So really trying to make sure that we're still protecting that collaboration time. We also have revised the way that we've been working with our teachers on their professional goals, doing a lot more of like cycles of feedback, checking in on kind of next steps and how we can support our teachers with their professional learning goals, making that a lot more regular. So more frequent touch points as a means of providing additional support. Dan, Lisa, any other supports you want to mention?
Sure. One thing that has been unique since last March and is continuing to be and is continuing to happen is that grade level teams and specialist teams are meeting are meeting with us, the principals, in terms of smaller teams. So we're just starting another cycle of we call them check-ins. So meetings where the three of us are there, and the team, we get to talk about information and questions that teams have that are pertinent solely to that team. We just had our meeting today with the drama team. Because when we're not able to be in the same space and see each other and pass each other and have those, hey, just want to talk to you about this, making that time has been so crucial. And so that has been purposefully done and is continuing to happen throughout the year.
I think just to kind of close it out on this, I think sometimes the best support we give is the support that just happens in the moment, because there are so many of those moments right now. We are, constantly reaching out to our teachers via text, via email. We use Slack as a messaging, in-house, and we're constantly making sure that we're making ourselves available to our staff members whenever the need arises, whether it's, helping out problem solve something within, facilities wise, whether it's troubleshooting something tech wise remote, or just giving them the support they need when they need it the most. Just making sure that we are there for those in the moment needs that we know are so crucial right now.
We've also tried to build in some little drop-in sessions at critical points when we know there's a lot going on, where there might be a lot on staff members' minds. Like, for example, last week, with everything going on in the world, we each tried to create some spaces where staff members could gather and just talk through things that were on their minds and provide support for one another in a safe space. So those are some examples.
Thank you, guys. And it's not perfect, right? It's a hard year. We all need a lot of support this year. There's more. I wish we could do more. I think I wish we could do all more to support each other in so many ways, parents, you included. I really appreciate that question. Thank you. A few clarifying questions about what VAPA is. VAPA is Visual and Performing Arts. You see the flyer there. This also came out in Bare Essentials. If you haven't seen Bare Essentials from last week, please look at it. There's a lot of links to sign up in there. And if your student is interested in participating in one of these after hours, after school, extracurricular activity time frames there, you'll see the grade levels. There's more information in Bare Essentials last week and how to sign up for one of those opportunities. Good question about in-person families. Are they going to be surveyed about staying on site? Nope, we're not going to survey in-person families at this stage. Our assumption is because you're in person, you will continue to remain in person. If for some reason that needs to change, please just reach out to your principal to have that conversation with them. A bit of a tangent question, but I appreciate it. I'll grab it. About enrollment for next year, right? How's things looking? We actually had a call, all of us today, talking about our lottery. Our lottery is coming up on the 23rd, Saturday the 23rd. Our open enrollment closes next Friday. If you do have individuals, family members, friends who want to be part of our school community for next school year, we have a lot of bodies and we are not under, the question was, are we undersubscribed or not undersubscribed? We have ample and more than space that we have, which is always a tough spot, right? In some hearts, you're like, awesome, we look at all the numbers we have, it feels good, so many people want to come. And then the heart tug is the educator in me is we won't be able to offer spots to all those families. And that's tough. So it's something that's upcoming for us and making sure we start and our lottery happens soon. Good question about remote student coming back in person. Can we guarantee that they'll be at their home campus?
The short answer is no, we cannot guarantee that. We try our best, but that isn't a guarantee. There are some that early in the year that did have to go to the other campus, and it's turned out okay. But we can't guarantee that won't be the case.
Dan, here's a good one. I know your team has done a ton of work just around how are we supporting students' mental health right now?
Oh, there's a lot of things that we're doing. Again, I'm going to talk about advisory again, because it is a big avenue of how we are supporting our middle schoolers. Just today, I was on a call with Ms. Schlala, our middle school team leader, who is preparing to go out and do some, we're going to collect some feedback from our middle schoolers tomorrow. That's going to give us an insight as just how they're doing and how they're feeling about things, and give us some opportunities to create those connections with them and follow up on some things that might, be on their minds. I know middle school families, I know you saw this past Sunday on how we supported them on the events of last week at the US Capitol. So we're pivoting, in those instances where we know that we need to with our middle schoolers. And we're just making sure that our communication within our, with our teachers is just really tight and cohesive. When we notice that there's learners who need extra support, extra time, anything that can help make, their experience both, remote and in person, as healthy as it can be for them emotionally, we're working together to make sure that we provide those supports for our learners. And, I'm also in constant communication with Marina Shepard, our counselor, as to how, I can continue to support our middle schoolers, how I can give our teachers the resources to support our middle schoolers. It is without a doubt probably one of the top 2 or 3 things on my mind every single day that I'm, working with our middle schoolers.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to add in, we've been having a lot of fun with something new that we've been trying this year, our weekly Bear broadcasts on Mondays and Fridays. And that has been a great platform for our counselor, Marina Shepard, to do a segment, usually every other week, is about the average time that she'd come on, and she will offer some strategies, modeling some strategies, talking through some scenarios to try and provide some additional support school-wide, and some messaging that we can all be taking as far as strategies that we can try all together, a shared language around that.
And I think,
go ahead, Lisa.
I think too, it's even been more obvious in terms of the needs of the staff and what we do together as a staff in terms of mindfulness and realizing the needs that we have. And I think the more that increased awareness has naturally trickled down to facilitating those same types of experiences for our learners.
Yeah, it's a hard time to be anybody. Nobody has it easy right now, y'all, but it is hard. Middle school is hard. I'm wanted to be like, oh, middle school is absolutely hard, and it is so hard. But our young ones have it hard too. And our college, like everybody is just dealing with a lot right now. And I appreciate that question around mental health, because it's critically important that we find strategies, right? And that what the principals describe are things that we're doing. It's not just, oh yeah, it's important, and then letting it go. We really need to make sure we're leaning in, and it's not a short term. This is a long-term need for us to really make sure that we are finding best ways to support the mental health of our students. Absolutely. A good question. I just want to clarify. There is no requirement for you to come on site. If you're a remote person and for NWEA testing, let me get my words straight. We are offering the option for in-person testing for NWEA. It is not required. We know if you are remote, there are many reasons, and some of those might be health reasons, whether for your student or members of your family. Please don't take that risk if that is a concern that you have. We are still administering our NWEA test remotely. That is still an option. Components of that will be taken remotely. If you recall, our math portion will be the only thing that we take on site. So there still are going to be other parts of that are remote for our remote learners. So if that is a concern you have about coming on site, please take that remote. There is no requirement for you to be on site. I've got a great comment I just want to lean into. I appreciate you parents said in the comments. Yes, travel is a thing that we are saying no to, but also, let's be clear, the guidelines say don't mix households. Please don't do that. That is compromising also what is happening with our community right now. Families coming into town, friends coming into town. Oh, it'll be fine. Let's just add quarantine, leave quarantine, come into our house. Like, no, like we cannot have the mixing of households right now. I know our public health guidelines are very clear on that as well. And that's another area that we just have to be very aware of. It's not just the traveling, because cases are so prevalent around the area. It also is that mixing of households. So please, again, we ask for all of us to follow the professionals who are providing us guidance here and saying, do not mix households. Good question. I think is really thoughtful, because we know this year has been challenging. What's the status with grades? Knowing that it's been a hard year, and it's hard for sometimes students to stay engaged. Grades might be slipping. Dan, this might go a little more towards you. What's the strategy of how we're operating and thinking about grades this year?
So we are still issuing grades this year, but that being said, we want our kids to, we want to give our kids the ability to be as successful as they possibly can during this time period. We want to be flexible with giving kids opportunities to show progress towards meeting standards, meeting them where they are in terms of their mental and emotional health, and giving them the time and the space that they need to complete assignments, thinking about ways that we can manage the workload, keeping all of those assignments within the 8 to 3:30 realm in our middle school time, so they do have time to decompress from the school day and take care of themselves. If these, we're here to support you all with that and make sure that not only are we helping our kids meet those standards, because we do want them to be academically successful, but also that we're taking care of them emotionally as well. And those are things that, reach out to us, reach out to the teachers so that we can continue to support your learner to help maximize engagement, but also make sure that we're supporting them emotionally.
Awesome. I'm watching time and looking through questions to make sure that we are capturing. Another clarification I see, so I want to make sure. There was people asking about some emails, like when did we send out an email over break about the positive COVID case. We send that out to the full community. So if you didn't receive an email from me or you're not receiving Bare Essentials, please reach out to our campus, info@bullischarterschool.com, so we can make sure that your email is updated in PowerSchool. We send emails every week, Bare Essentials every week. We send any important information, that being one. This is definitely not the first time we've communicated about that. We want to make sure we're being as transparent as possible. I think we pushed out comms within 4 hours of knowing that day over our break. So definitely, if you're like, I don't get that, that's a flag. Definitely make sure that you reach out, info@bullischarterschool.com, so that you are receiving all the communications from us. That's super important. Want to make sure you all are informed. And the answer to that is one. There's been one person who has been a confirmed positive on site. Just another clarification. I know we started and some people might had to jump on a little bit later because of prior commitments. At this stage, right now, the survey we are sending out starting tomorrow about returning to in-person, that right now we anticipate is the only survey for the remainder of the year. We don't right now anticipate there would be another opportunity. I see some questions about like, what if we push that maybe until later in March or in April? Again, those February dates are tentative, but what's very much on our mind when we think about March and April is we do get into CASP testing, which is a lot of the negotiating and rostering and moving things around, as well as just a lot of culmination of things happening at the end of we're in the middle of our third trimester at that stage. We've got a lot of assessments that teachers are closing out with, and that's really jarring to think about making adjustments at that stage in the year. So that's why we've been looking at the February-March timeline to bring back additional in-person students. Again, that might change depending on what plays out around us, but we wanted to make that move sooner so that there was more time to establish those relationships to make sure we got off to a smooth start as we go into that third trimester, rather than jarring things up in the middle of a trimester and then having to jump into the CASP testing and everything else that happens when you close out a school year. An interesting question about, will K3 students, might they have to be hybrid? If there are more in-person students returning in K3, might they be hybrid? Anyone want to comment on that?
I will say it's possible. We recognize that if we have high demand for in-person spots, it's something that we might have to consider. Yeah, as Maureen had mentioned earlier, there are no guarantees about how this will play out, but it does depend on numbers and what we are able to make work within the given constraints.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Good question about sports happening outside of school. What does that mean for mixing households? Just to clarify, in the mixing households, typically that is interpreted as being in a space without masks with individuals, being in close proximity without being properly socially distanced and having those masks. Hopefully, if you are participating in an outdoor sports, students are still required to wear masks, they're still staying socially distanced. We definitely ask you to ensure that that's happening with teams that you are part of. And then I believe right now the guideline is there is one team that you can be a part of, not multiple at this stage. So just recognizing that it is a risk. It is a risk, and it is one that is with the right protections and precautions in place is appropriate. What is important to note, and someone identified this, which is true, there might be students who are together in a cohort at school, which is great. How awesome. I'm friends with that parent. So cool, let's get our kids together. Don't unmask them. Don't unmask them together. They're not unmasked at school. Don't bring them together and unmask them in the space that's compromising it. So we want to make sure we're keeping those masks on. If you do have a friend in a cohort, your kiddos are in the same cohort together, and you want to get them together outside of school to connect, fantastic. Do it outside, socially distanced. Don't do it indoors. Don't do it without masks. That's super helpful to make sure that we're continuing that. A question about if we want to come, let's say, yeah, I want to come back in person, but then I find I have to be moved to another campus. Can I opt out at that stage? Then we want to talk about what that would mean for us.
We realize that might be an issue for people. So when the need has been to have a child go to the other campus, we have reached out and made contact in those instances. Of course, we have no idea how this is going to pan out. If there are 95 people who might be in that situation, we might react differently. But so far, if there was someone from South,
oh, we lost her. But she was going to say, let's see. So far, if there was someone from South who needed to go to North, I'm guessing what she's going to say. She has made all those phone calls to those families and talked through what that transition would look like before they had to lock in. Yeah, good. All right.
I heard everything that you said, even though I had a shoddy connection moment. So, and I was sitting there the whole time like, yes, and you couldn't see it. That's all good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's where we are. We now can finish each other's sentences.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Fabulous. I know, right? Don't let that be a limiting factor for you if you're thinking about sending your student back, but no, it's a possibility. If it's a definite hard no for you, I ask you to consider that a little bit. We don't want to, we know it's a challenge. And like, as Lacey described, we have other students who are in that boat, and it's been able to work thus far. So don't let that be your limiting factor. Definitely continue and know that we'll have a space to engage in that conversation if that's necessary.
I just want to
go ahead, Jess. Yeah,
I was just going to add too, that doesn't mean, for example, if your child is at South Campus and then there's an in-person spot only at North Campus, it doesn't mean that they will be North Campus until the end of time. We're really just looking at this year. We still consider South your home campus, but just based on spots available, it might mean temporarily being at North for this year.
Yep, great. Looks like we have time for maybe one more question here. This is a thoughtful question that I think if you are an in-person parent, you're like, yeah, is there a chance in-person classes could go hybrid? Someone want to talk about what our status is with people in person?
As I mentioned earlier, I feel like at this point, we are trying to be very creative with our thinking and being as flexible as possible. While we would love to maintain as much stability as possible wherever we can get it. I mean, let's be real. We all need stability in our lives right now. We want to keep things as stable as possible. But if we do see a need to switch our model to including hybrid, as opposed to a 5-day program, it is something that we might need to consider as creative thinkers. But please know that we always try to opt for what can we do to maintain stability.
Yeah, that would not be a decision that we came to lightly. That would be obviously an impact on well over 100+ families. So I don't foresee that as being a route that we would go unless there was a dramatic need. In which case, we would absolutely consult with you and talk through the structures and pros and cons of that. So I don't want that keeping you up at night. Right now, we're far from that stage. But I appreciate Jess recognizing that we also can't lock a lot of things in this world right now and make promises that we then have to pull back on. So I wouldn't let that prevent you from moving on through your day. But know that we just want to make sure we're mindful of recognizing all the things. We know it's been a long day and a long night for everybody. And I know there might be a few questions that you're like, hey, we didn't quite get what you needed. If there's something that you're still interested in and don't quite know, don't hesitate to reach out to your principal. we can definitely follow up and help support you, whether it's through making a decision or just clarification on something going on. We want to make sure families that you're as informed as possible in the midst of everything that we're all working through together. So as always, we're just grateful for you being partners with us in this, whether it's through providing us thoughts or feedback or positive comments or information. This is work that is hard on all of us this year. And in your partnership and thoughtfulness as we work through this together is just really, really important. So I'm so appreciative to all of you for asking really thoughtful questions too, and really helping push us to think through scenarios and make sure that you all are receiving the supports that you need. So we will make sure that this is, obviously it's been recorded. We'll make sure that we get this out to all families who couldn't be here. We'll most likely include this in Bare Essentials this week. I see Alan nodding, so that's probably our move so that you have access to it. And then again, as always, if there's questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll make sure we keep you all as informed as possible. And remote families, be on the lookout, whether tomorrow or next week, for that initial survey coming for information from you on next steps if you do want to opt in. If you do opt in, there's a lot more info sessions you'll come to, so stay tuned. You'll learn a lot more information there, but we'll keep you all updated. Everybody, please be safe. Please be safe. Take care of yourselves. Parents, my gosh, take care of your mental health too and your personal selves right now. Some self-care is critically important. It can't be overstated. There's a lot going on around us, and you all need to be healthy in your best selves, not only for yourselves, but for your kiddos and each other. So please make sure you're crafting time for yourselves. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful night. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.